On the forest floor, a trail of dust and pheromones maps the destiny of thousands. A single ant loses its way, a chemical scent breaks, and the mistake becomes fatal. She begins to follow the ant in front of her, who in turn follows the one before, closing a perfect ring of continuous blind movement. What begins as a minor detour transforms into a centrifugal force of epic proportions. Hundreds, then thousands of black bodies march in a closed circle, a living gear grinding upon itself. There is no leader, no objective, and no exit. There is only the march, steady and relentless. They walk to total exhaustion, trampling over the bodies of those who fell first. This death spiral is a whirlpool of wasted energy, where individual effort is devoured by the mindless logic of the collective. It is the physical manifestation of absolute nihilism on the damp soil of the wild. For those observing from above, the scene possesses a terrifying geometric beauty. It is the spectacle of nature losing its sense, a system failure revealing the fragility of any purpose. Death does not come from a predator, but from the very same blind obedience to another's path. But why? Why does nature allow the very tool of survival to become the weapon of extinction? The answer lies not in biology, but in the terrible realization that movement alone does not guarantee we are going anywhere. The circle is the end of all things. If you feel that your daily routine is an infinite loop leading nowhere, welcome to Why. Subscribe to question the system with us. Comment below. Are you following a purpose or just the scent of whoever is in front? The ant does not possess a panoramic view of its own existence. It relies entirely on the scent trail left by the companion ahead. To her, the path is an absolute truth dictated by invisible and unquestionable chemical signals. Following the trail defines her function and her safety. The problem arises when the trail closes in on itself, creating an infinite loop of positive feedback. The ant believes she is making progress because her legs move, and the direction is confirmed by thousands of others. However, she is merely accelerating toward her own physical collapse and ruin. We, as humans, often operate under modern pheromones, trends, algorithms, and social expectations that dictate our rhythm. We follow the flow without asking where it runs, trusting that the masses cannot be wrong. Constant movement gives us the false sensation that we are evolving towards something better. The death spiral is a reminder that collective consensus can be a fatal mathematical error. When a group loses its reference to the outside world, it begins to feed on its own energy until death. The ant is a slave to a system that lacks an off switch. She marches with admirable discipline, but zero intelligence regarding the big picture. Her virtue as a worker becomes her greatest flaw when the objective is lost. The circle proves that loyalty to the system, without critical vision, is a pact of slow and rhythmic self-destruction. At the center of the spiral, the void is the only absolute master of every ant involved. There is no food, no queen to protect, and no colony to build. There is only the pure, repetitive act of placing one leg before the other until the heart stops. Schopenhauer viewed the will as a blind, insatiable impulse that pushes us to action without any ultimate end. The ant spiral is the visual representation of this will, a colossal effort that produces nothing but more effort. It is nihilism manifested in chitin, legs, and forest dust. Ants that fall from exhaustion are quickly trampled by those coming from behind, without any hesitation. There is no compassion or pause, as the gear of the circle demands that the movement never ceases. Individual death is just a minor hiccup in the macabre inertia of the ring. We spend decades in careers and consumption cycles that resemble this circular, purposeless march. We work to buy what allows us to keep working, closing the ring of our own exhaustion. We believe the next lap will bring liberation, but it only brings more weariness and debt. The why here is a cry against the futility of a life lived only to keep the machine turning. The ant's nihilism is our mirror, the realization that the universe is indifferent to our sweat. If we do not step off the track, we are just dust. Natural selection is often viewed as a process of perfection, but the death spiral shows its cracks. Instinct, which should guarantee the colony's life, becomes the agent that decimates it in a few hours of rotation. Biology is a code that can freeze in a permanent loop. This failure teaches us that nature has no benevolent master plan for the individual. It tests mechanisms. If the mechanism fails in a spiral, the error is simply discarded by death. The penguin on the mountain was a solitary error, but the ants are a systemic, collective failure. Often, our institutions and political systems enter similar spirals of organized self-destruction. Laws and customs that once served to protect us can become loops that suffocate us when the context changes. Blind tradition is the pheromone that keeps us spinning in a circle of ancient broken errors. The ant lacks the capacity to look up and realize the geometric pattern of its tragedy. She is too immersed in the detail of the step to comprehend the madness of the whole. Evolution did not grant her the gift of doubt, only the curse of certainty. The madness of the ant is, in truth, an obedience taken to the extreme of biological absurdity. She dies not from a lack of effort, but from an excess of it in the wrong direction. It is the ultimate warning that hard work, isolated from reason, kills. Behind the lens of a microscope or a phone camera, the human observes the spiral with fascination. We feel an intellectual superiority watching the ants walk toward their end, but the feeling soon transforms into a deep and chilling existential discomfort that we cannot easily escape or ignore. We realize we are just as susceptible to mental and social loops as the insects we despise. Our toxic productivity culture is our own particular death spiral. We run just to avoid being left behind by those in front, without knowing who is actually leading the race. Commusian absurdity manifests in our attempt to give meaning to this natural tragedy. We want to believe there is a lesson or a purpose, but perhaps the spiral is just what it is, an error. The universe is filled with these small, terrifying vacuums of objective meaning. The observer is the only one who could break the circle, but he rarely intervenes in nature. He prefers to record the fall, transforming the insect's suffering into aesthetic or scientific content. The ant dies in the void while we watch the video on our own screens. The spiral forces us to ask if our civilization is not just a larger circle with a more complex chemical trail. We spin around currencies and gods we created to avoid facing the void. The observer of the ant is, in the end, the ant itself. A minimal chance exists that the circle might be broken by an external factor or a dissident ant. Sometimes a physical obstacle diverts the trail, or the pheromone dissipates with the rain. Only the interruption of the flow can save the group from a certain, grueling death. Salvation requires chaos, a break in the established order that forces the ants to seek new trails. Order, in this context, is the villain. Disorder is the only hope for survival. A mistake within the mistake is necessary for life to flow once again. For the human being, breaking the spiral requires the conscious act of stopping and looking around. It takes courage to abandon the trail everyone follows and face the uncertain, unmarked terrain. Authentic freedom begins the moment we decide not to be the next piece of movement. The Adelie penguin chose the mountain. The heroic ant would be the one who simply deviates from the circle. Both choices lead to solitude, but only solitude allows us to escape the inertia of the herd. Authentic life resides outside the rigid, cold, and geometric curve. In the end, only the motionless bodies remain on the forest floor, forming a black monument to persistence without vision. The forest continues in silence, indifferent to the tragedy. The circle dissolves into the earth, preparing the soil for the next generation of walkers. The ant's death spiral is a brutal warning about the dangers of blind obedience and movement without purpose. On why, we seek to understand why we so often choose to spin in collective error rather than face the uncertainty of the individual path. Nature is not just beauty. It is a laboratory of absurdities that reflects our own human failings. If you feel like you are walking in circles, perhaps it is time to stop and question the trail you are following. The meaning of life is not the march, but the direction. Exit the spiral